Cornelia Meyer is CEO of business consultancy MRL Corporation.
Morning,
and is
Cornelia.
with us. Hello.
Good morning.
We must say that obviously when the newspapers were going to press, the numbers coming out of Nairobi for the death toll were still being updated. So the Independent saying as many as 40 people. Looking at the numbers who had died, we now are at 68.
Yeah.
The Independent, a UK newspaper, also taking a look at what the Foreign Office is saying and saying that maybe one of the attackers may be British, being known as the Muslims have been known from the UK to be fighting from Al-Shabaab. All countries taking a very close look at what's going on in Kenya.
Absolutely. I mean, it's absolutely tragic. I mean, it's really, really bad. And the question is, how do you protect a society from perpetrators like this? Everybody says it's a multitude of nationalities, some Somalis, some Kenyans, and some other nationalities, might be a Briton. But I think, until we really know who it was, it's futile to speculate.
It looks, though, again, when you look at the region, you look at what Kenya's doing with the African Union in Somalia, trying to push back Al-Shabaab, it just brings more concerns of instability in the region.
Absolutely, no, absolutely. And you saw it in North Africa. We saw it in Algeria. You see it here. There are very, very bad radicalized elements that have a strong destabilizing factor on the region.
Which, from an investment point of view,
is a bad thing. I mean, why would you invest where there's instability when you can invest where there is stability? And the problem is, we are very lucky here to have very good, well-functioning security services. These are younger countries with not such well-functioning security services. And if you are the security service, you need to be right 100% every single time. If you're a terrorist, you only need to be right 1 in a million times. That's why it is, so hard for these countries to get a grip over that problem.
Now, let's have a look at the other big story today, that being Angela Merkel's victory. And the papers, of course, were going to the press when they hadn't got the final results through. So it's interesting how the Financial Times and the Frankfurt Allgemeine sort of talk about there's a majority in sight. It's very close. She might get that majority. Obviously, she didn't. But still, I mean, it's a resounding victory for her.
It's the best result in 20 years for her party. And in Germany there has never been. Germany is a traditional country where you have coalition governments. There is very rarely has there been outright majority of anybody. So she knew she would probably have to have a coalition. What is really the big story here is, yes, her victory, but that the Liberal Democrats, the Freie Demokrat, the FDP, did not make the 5% hurdle. In Germany, you have to get 5% in order to be allowed to get into parliament.
So she's going to the left now.
So she has to go to the left. She had that in 2009, or at some stage already, where she had what they call the big coalition, the grand coalition, where she had the Liberals and the Social Democrats. It's going to be tough. She could go to the Greens, I don't see that, but it's going to be tough, especially as Mr. Steinbrück said, if he's not winning, he's going to step down. So the Social Democrats first need to get a new leader, and then can they start negotiations.
But that's kind of her strength, isn't it? It's her working with lots of different people, her negotiating, her patience, would you say?
Yeah, she's a pastor's daughter, so she has those values of working with people, listening.
It's much more about collaboration as opposed to my way or the highway kind of thing.
Absolutely, and she will need to draw on those skills very, very certainly
over the next few weeks.
China Business Weekly has an interest. It's interesting when you see the picture of a traffic light, because we're somewhere in the middle, aren't we? We're an amber light. This is what a group of economists now is saying for Asia. Explain what's being said here.
Well, what they're saying is, especially the countries with current account deficits, have to defend their currencies. are not in such good shape. They're also saying, and if you look at it, when we were worried about the tapering of the U.S. spending, how a lot of money went out of emerging markets, and now they didn't taper, so it went back into the emerging markets in order to go back out later on when they then finally taper. So you see that, and you see a few currencies, especially the rupee, which has devalued 30% since the beginning of the year. And the Indonesian rupee as well, which has devalued, under attack. It's not as bad, and they point out it's not as bad as the 1997 crisis, because when you look at it, Thailand, Indonesia, Malaysia, they totally restructured their financial system. So they consolidated the banks. So they're in reasonably good shape, but they need the OECD. A lot of these economies are export-driven. They need OECD economies to do well in order to be able to export.
Right, let's have a look at the other story in China, where they had a bit of Hollywood action, as it were. South China Morning Post business section looking at this huge announcement in Dalian, which is where World Economic Forum has just had their big event, actually only a week or so ago, where this multi-billionaire has announced a huge injection into their film industry. I mean, the Chinese film industry is emerging pretty swiftly, and there's a lot of money there too, which is attracting a lot of interest from Hollywood.
Yeah, I think, and it's certainly a big market for people, because you have 1.3 billion people who all potentially can go to the movies. And it's certainly big. It's emerging as film industry, as domestic film industry. But this is a very smart move, sort of to put on strong bricks and mortar assets. So James Bond is an underwater, the only fixed underwater studio. So we will probably see that in James Bond movie. In terms of the film industry, I'm not an expert on this, but when I look at it, Hollywood and Bollywood, they both come from very free societies and very creative societies. So I think that the bricks and mortar strategy is probably pretty good in order to try and get that magic.
The creativity from overseas, perhaps.
Let's talk about the flu. It's the changing seasons in Europe, but lots of colds are emerging. I think you were warning that you may be getting one now. Explain this vaccine.
Well, they found this CD8 T immune cell, and they made studies of with the swine flu, and they found the people that didn't get it all had this CD8T immune cell, and they found if they created a vaccine around that, we might be immune against all flu.
It's boosting our immunity.
Yeah, we may be, but there's always viruses and bacteria are just incredibly creative.
I was going to say
they're like as creative, at least as creative as Hollywood. If you give them good vaccines, they will get new
They'll just
strands.
change.
Yeah.
Cornelia, it's always a pleasure having you with us. Cornelia Meyer from CRL. Sally and I will see you very soon.
Bye-bye. Thanks for your company.